Hey everyone. So in this video, what we're going to take a look at is list views. List views are really important for any mobile application for getting data to the user end. Uh, you'll you'll more than likely when you use an application, you're going to see some type of list view. So it's really good idea to have a good grasp on list views. So this subject should be put into a few parts at least. The first one we're going to take a look at is a really simple list view, just creating a list view and putting it and getting it on screen. Here's an example of how it's going to look once we're done with this video. So you can see just a simple list view, click on it, highlight, just some names. So let's get started on that. All right, let's exit out of this application. All right, so go ahead and start up Visual Studio or Xamarin Studio. New project, Android, a blank app. Call it ListView tutorial. Okay, and if you're familiar with doing list views in with Java, you'll feel right at home here. Xamarin does it a lot of the same way. It's when it comes to like the click events is when it gets a little different, but the fundamentals of creating the list view is pretty similar to the way it's done in Java. So the first thing you want to do is go into your main Android XML file, which is going to be in resources, layout, and main. So go ahead and double click that. This is going to be our designer for the activity that's going to launch, which right now is the main launcher, and we can tell by that from looking at this. This is how Xamarin declares the main launcher. So go back over to here, and we can get rid of this button. Don't need it. And we can code this out, but it's pretty simple to just drag it over. And then in your toolbox, if you don't have the toolbox open right now, in Visual Studio, you can go into View. It'll be right here, Toolbox, or if it's not there, it could be in here, in the other Windows tab. Okay, so let's go ahead and find the list view, which is right here. Go ahead and click on it, drag it over. And you see that it populated a list view inside of our code. We can go ahead and delete this. We don't need it. And we want the height to match the parents. So basically that's saying we want it to take up this whole space widthwise, and we want the list view to take up the whole space height-wise as well. So basically the whole screen in this case right now. And we'll change the ID to something a little less generic, like my list view. And for that is all that we need to do. All right, so come back into your main activity, and what you want to first do is create an array, you can say, of strings, which are in this case are going to be names. So, but we will do, instead of an array, we'll do a list, which is really simple to use, a lot more simple to use than an array. And what we first need to do is import it in. So this is .NET system collections.generic. Will allow you to use the list data type. So the string is just saying that it's giving a generic that, you know, this is going to hold strings, and then we'll call it just items. Now that we have that, what we could do is go into here, and we want to populate those items. First instantiate it, goes new list. So now we have our items, and we need to fill it with some strings, which in this case is going to be names, and it's pretty simple. mitems.add will add it, and it wants a string, so that's when we can do Bob, Tom, and Jim. So now we got our names, and we'll get rid of this button right here. Don't need that stuff right now. Okay, so now that we got our names, what the next thing you want to do is you want to get our list view. And those of you who are familiar with Java, it's pretty similar. It's actually almost identical. You get a list view, and the ID that it was over here, which is very important, is what you're going to want to use to get a reference of this list view in the code. So what you first want to do is, and then you do a find view by ID, and the generic, feed it tell it that it's going to be a list view. Resource.id. That's when it's a little different. Java is usually RID. For Xamarin, you're going to use resource.id dot, and then notice that sometimes there's in IntelliSense there's not my list view ID. That a lot of times happens because it just needs to compile or rebuild itself. So you can do it right here. It's not going to hurt, but it might give you an error. It doesn't recognize it yet. So the only thing that you have to do, really, what mostly fixes, is just rebuild it. And then it should recognize this. And sure enough, it did. So if you see now, it's in your IntelliSense. Okay, so now that we have our list view, we have our names. What you want to do is you need to have something that's called an array adapter. And an array adapter is a good way to make really generic lists like the one you saw in the beginning of this video. So what you want to do is an array adapter of strings for the generic, and we'll just name it adapter, instantiate it. Oops. Okay, so we have our adapter, and oops. So in the constructor, you'll see that there's there's 7 constructors, but what we can do is just look at this one and see, okay, it's going to need a context, which we can just send it this activity. Since activity is a subclass of context, this will be applicable, no problem at all. So the next thing needs the resource, which is this guy. This is the one we're going to use. And the resource is, right now, we're not going to make our own. We're just going to use one of the built-in ones. So how you get that is Android resource layout, and I believe it's called simple list item 1 is what we're going to use. So this is just this represents simple list item right now is representing each row in the list view. So let's do that. The next video we'll create our own simple list item, so then we can start customizing our list views. But for right now, just enter that in, and the next thing you need is just your names. You need to know the names, and that will do. Okay, so now you got our adapter, got our names, and let's bring that up to the top, of course. Okay, so let's do that. Sorry about that. And now that we have that, all we need to do is take our list view, and the property has a property of an adapter. And what Xamarin does a lot is Java did a lot of set adapter or get adapter, and .NET uses something that's called properties, which are essentially the same thing. They're fields with methods that their property is basically a field that can execute code within it, if that makes sense. If you're not familiar with it, then take a look at properties for .NET, and you'll start to get a hang of them, because Xamarin uses a lot of it. So that's kind of one of the main differences between C# and Java as far as that is. There's not really many get methods or set methods. There's more properties, which are essentially the same thing, but it's a little cleaner way to do things. So just keep that in mind. And when here we'll set the adapter, and that should run. Let's try it out. So I got my emulator right here, and this is Xamarin's, the Xamarin Android player. So if you don't have that, just check out Xamarin's emulator. Then you can just download it, check it out. So I'm running the Nexus 4 KitKat right here, and we should be able to just run this guy and be able to see it in action. Okay, so it's building. Once the emulator gets going, it's a lot faster than the normal Google emulators that are really slow. So I recommend downloading one of these, and it's It's a lot faster. Oh, okay. So what happened was the minimum Android version does not support it. So that's an easy fix. So if you guys do have that problem, just go ahead and go in your properties, double click that, and then go into your minimum and set it to like 4.0 or something like that, and then compile at API level 19, and that should fix our problem. So if you guys get that, go ahead and go into properties and then change this to the minimum Android version is what it was complaining about. All right, we'll close that out. Try it one more time. All right, there it is. So just like you've seen in the beginning of the video, Bob, Tom, Jim, I even happen to use the same names, I think. So uh, there it is. Really basic. If it was longer than this, the list view would scroll just like you would expect from a list view. And uh, there you have it. So hope you enjoyed it. And next video, we should take a look at implementing click methods on this list view. So if someone clicks it, writing code and events and wiring up an event to handle that click method. So stay tuned. Thanks, guys.